Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Metal Gladiator podcast. My name is Ian Sylvain, and I am the Metal Gladiator. Episode 1 of the podcast. Very excited to do this podcast. Made a promise to myself that I would do it in January, so here it is. Now, for the structure of these podcasts, I'm mostly going to be, the first part would be going through a certain band or two, and then the second part would be a top 10. So, and the band or two that I'll be going over, because I do want to touch on two bands. I'll be talking about Behemoth and the band Earthside. And then after that, I will be doing my top 10 Cannibal Corpse albums. On YouTube, I did a video of top 10 Cannibal Corpse albums, but since then they've released 2 albums, so I'm going to do it again on the podcast, which I'm pretty much replacing my old album reviews on there. And also, before we get into it, I will say that every time I do record a podcast, I will be going live on Instagram. So, if you want more, if you want to hear the podcast live, or if you want to, well, yeah, it's going to be live, but if you want to hear it before, a couple days before it's even uploaded, follow me on Instagram. It's, the username is Ian Sylvain, Ian.Sylvain 1776. And I will, through Instagram story, I announce when I'm going to be recording it. But yeah, so let's get right into it. Behemoth is they're technically like a black metal band, but they're more like black death metal, black metal, whatever term you want to use, black death black. Black death sounds better. And, yeah, I don't consider myself a huge Behemoth fan. I have one of their albums, Evangelion. Yeah, that's the album I have. It was a 2009 release, I believe. But yeah, I have one of their albums. I like it. I like a lot of their stuff. And yeah, I'm just gonna go through some of their stuff, I guess. Probably my favorite album is the album Demigod. It's a really good album, really heavy album. And because it's my favorite album, I think that's the peak of their career, really. I wasn't crazy. I don't think it was bad, but I wasn't crazy about the Satanist album. And then in a second I will be going into their most recent album, the album that was released last year, I Love You at Your Darkest. I'll be going into that. But Evangelion was an album I really like. It's the only album I have in my collection by Behemoth. But yeah, Demigod. The production of it was really raw sounding, which added to the heaviness and just dark overtone. Of course, all the Behemoth albums are dark. But yeah, that's great album. That song Demigod is really good. The first song on it, the album starts off with acoustic, kind of like a classical acoustic part, and that part was really good. I really liked it. Which is not something you hear a lot in Behemoth. You don't really hear like a ton of acoustic. So starting the album off with acoustic was pretty cool. It was a pretty neat idea. But yeah, it's just a great album. Like if you haven't heard Behemoth at all, I'd go ahead and start with Demigod. Because if you don't like Demigod, you probably won't like Behemoth. But I mean, you could say that about all their albums. If you don't like this album, you probably won't like him. But I mean, I think Demigod, Evangelion, and the other one that I'm drawing a blank on now, Horns of something, I can't remember. The one that has As Above, So Below. Those 3 albums are definitely the best and good starters. So yeah, those 3 albums I definitely recommend, especially if you are wanting to get into Behemoth. But yeah, like the thing about, because I'm not crazy about black metal. It's never been a genre I've had any interest in. Not just like lyrically, because I just don't really like the whole satanic stuff about it, but just musically it's never been interesting to me. But there's certain bands like Behemoth that kind of adds different elements from other genres into it. Like I said before, they're kind of like a black death metal, you know. So they do have a lot of their riffs in music does have kind of like that death metal vibe to it, which I like, you know. I'm a huge death metal fan. So yeah, that's one reason why I really do like Behemoth. I would say they're a really good band. I wouldn't use the word great. I'd say like really, really good. But then 2014, the album The Satanist came out. Wasn't crazy about that album. I liked a couple songs on it. Blow Your Trumpets, Gabriel, you know, that's a single. So that was the big single that was the first single of the album that was released, I think. But yeah, that was the most popular song on that album. I liked it. It was good. But then 2018, I Loved You at Your Darkest came out, and I don't know. I've just kind of lost interest with Behemoth recently. I don't think it's a bad album. Definitely not. Definitely don't think it's a bad album. I honestly like it a little more than The Satanist, but they tried like new things that just didn't really fit well with me, like the children choir. It didn't fit for me, especially with Behemoth's music. It just really didn't fit. I didn't really like it at all, and I think they used it like 2 or 3 songs. But yeah, I wasn't crazy about that. It just felt like the children's choir thing, and it felt like it was forced experimental, if that makes sense. Like they were forcing experimental aspects to it, when I think they should have just had like a album like Demigod or Evangelion, you know, like a pure Behemoth album. But they kind of did different things with this one. They had acoustic in one song that was not like acoustic in another song that I mentioned earlier, but yeah, like the majority of the song was acoustic with like the drums and stuff in the back. And I'm going to talk about the drums here in a second, because Inferno is one heck of a drummer. Like that's probably like the one aspect of Behemoth I can always enjoy is the drums, for sure. I mean, just go on YouTube, type in Behemoth drum cam. It's awesome. It's great drumming, great drumming all around. But yeah, like the acoustic on that one song wasn't just in the intro and then it got heavy. It was kind of like throughout. I mean, it's not like it was a non-heavy song, although in terms of Behemoth it kind of was. But it just didn't fit. I don't know what it was about this album. But yeah, I didn't really enjoy I Loved You at Your Darkest or The Satanist, so that's the two latest albums of Behemoth I just have not enjoyed. I don't think they're bad, but I just don't like them. So, yeah. I'm just kind of sticking to the older stuff, which sounds like a old school fan thing, you know. I gotta stick to the old stuff because the new stuff sucks. I don't think it sucks, but anyway. So yeah, the drums. I don't think I have, like, even if I really, really tried, I don't think I could say a negative thing about Inferno's drums. The dude's a beast. Like, every single album, he goes into the studio and does what he does, which is like insane blast beats and just awesome drumming all around. It's really good. Drums have never disappointed me. Like, even with the new albums, the drums have not disappointed me. But yeah. And I think, you know, the guitars and bass are good too. I've been, you know, kind of learning a couple riffs here and there. I know the riff in Demigod and Slaves Shall Serve, and of course the Blow Your Trumpets Gabriel riff is really easy. So I've got that down. But yeah, like, they're, like, as a guitarist, I think they're all really fun to play. But yeah, guitar's really good. It's not like the typical, like, the guitars kind of have something to do with the death metal aspect of it, because it's not like your typical black metal guitars. Like, black metal guitars just have that, I don't know, it's just like, it feels like a down picking that's just like constant here and there, you know. It's hard to explain, but it's, for me, like, most black metal guitar just sounds the same. I'm sorry, but it's just, a lot of black metal stuff just sounds the same to me. I guess I'll rate a couple of albums. I can't, like, remember, like, 2 or 3 of the albums, so, but I definitely think Demigod is my favorite album by them, so I would definitely rate that 9 out of 10. Definitely recommend it, especially if you haven't heard it. But, like, if you're into just extreme metal in general, I think you would like Demigod. It's a great album. Even Gillian, I'd give it like an 8 out of 10. Very good album. Satanists, I give it like a 4 out of 10. It didn't really intrigue me in the slightest. I Loved You at Your Darkest, I'd probably give it like a 5 out of 10. So I did enjoy it more than the Satanist, but I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's not like... I just want to make it completely clear that just because I don't like an album, that I don't... It doesn't mean that it's like completely different from albums that I do like. It's still a Behemoth album. It just didn't intrigue me as much as like their other stuff. So, but yeah, Behemoth isn't like a band I listen to a whole lot. I mostly did just want to talk about them on the first episode because I had that stuff to say about like the latest album, I Loved You at Your Darkest. Because like a lot of people seem to love it, and I kind of hate to be that guy, but it's really not that great of an album, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. But yeah, I think the biggest problem with it was they took an experimental approach, and they should have took a Behemoth approach, because this part is just kind of like, I don't know. It probably my best like shortest way of explaining it is it seems more like a solo album to Norgor than a Behemoth album. I hope that makes sense, but yeah, Behemoth. Overall, I mean, I think they're a good band. Kind of like a 50-50 band when it really comes down to it, because like half of their stuff I really like, and then half of the stuff I just think it's mediocre at best, you know. I definitely don't think they've ever produced anything that's would be considered bad. I definitely don't think that. Even Satanist and I Loved You at Your Darkest, I don't think they're bad. Behemoth is a band that's never released anything bad. Haven't necessarily always released good stuff, but not always bad. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Behemoth. And then I'm not gonna talk about this next band too much because I've only listened to 3 songs on their debut album, which is their only album out right now. But I'm talking about the band Earthside, and the album is A Dream in Static. And I've heard the first 3 songs on the album. The Closest I've Come, Mob Mentality, and the other song that I'm drawing a blank on. But yeah, it's progressive music, kind of like progressive, I don't want to say metal, but it's like progressive rockish stuff. Like some of the guitars get distorted and kind of heavy a little bit, but yes, progressive music. That should gain your interest enough. Like the first song, the Closest I've Come, it's like an 8-minute instrumental, and it's amazing. It got me hooked real fast. But I mean, just listen to that one song. Just listen to that one song and then see if you want to listen to the rest of the album. But that is definitely an album I recommend. It's A Dream in Static by Earthside. I'm definitely looking forward to more albums by this band. Even though I haven't heard their entire first album, I'm already looking forward to more, stuff. Like, that's how good they are. But yeah, very instrumental, progressive music. You can't go wrong with progressive music. Progressive rock, progressive metal. Most of it's just amazing. And it is the most experimental kind of music out there. So, pretty much every band you pick to listen to, it's like, oh, here's a new band that I never heard of or anything. They're progressive metal, progressive rock. It's going to be a new experience. Like with any band, really. But like progressive stuff, it's more so because of how experimental the genre is. But yeah, Earth Side, A Dream in Static, definitely go check it out. It's a great album. It's my album recommendation of the day, or of the month, week, whatever I decide to post this podcast. Whether it'll be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, I don't know. It'll just be whenever I want. Now we are getting into the final part of the podcast. And I definitely will say that these podcasts will get longer. I definitely plan on having guests on, so it's much easier for me to talk about a band, especially like certain bands, with someone else there. So we kind of build the flow of conversation is much better for me to talk about certain bands and build upon more, so that, like, if I was sitting here talking to whoever, like a Behemoth fan, I probably would have had much more to say about them. But I'm doing the first episode by myself, and I'll probably do more episodes by myself, but a lot of the times I do want to have a special guest, you know. Okay, top 10 Cannibal Corpse albums. Like I said at the beginning, I did make a YouTube video on this a while back, but Cannibal Corpse has released 2 other albums since that video, and I redid it. And one of those albums did make it, but the other one did not. Red Before Black. It's a good album, but it's not in the top 10. Sorry. I guess since I mentioned it, it would be an honorable mention. And when I'm done with this list, you can go back and watch that video, which is on my YouTube channel. Just Ian Sylvain. That's what the YouTube channel's called. You can go back and watch that and see how my list changed. Okay, so number 10 is Gallery of Suicide. I'm pretty sure Gallery of Suicide was number 10 last time. I think. I could be wrong, but yeah, I think it's a pretty solid album. The second album with George Corpse Grinder Fisher. It's a really good album. It's one of their... pretty sure it's like their longest... well, I'm not going to say longest album, but like it has the most songs. I think there's like 14 or 16 songs on the album. So, which is alright. Obviously, it's not like a Cannibal Corpse thing to make like more than 12 an album, really. Yeah, Gallery of Suicide. Artwork's pretty cool. This one has the instrumental from Skin to Liquid that I really liked a lot. The album itself is kind of mediocre in terms of Cannibal Corpse. Like, if it didn't have that instrumental from Skin to Liquid, any album could have been number 10. I could have had Go Obsessed or The Retro Spawn on number 10. Either of those ones or this one. It would have had like the same kind of results throughout the rest. So yeah, with me saying that, you know, those 2 albums are also not on the list. But yeah, that instrumental. Cannibal Corpse is not known for instrumentals, but it was really good. I really liked it. Like, really just like the first half of the album is really good. I'm not saying the second half's bad or anything, but it's just a really solid album, and I definitely recommend it. It's a good death metal album. Definitely check it out. It's got some really good songs on there. The instrumental is really good. Yeah, I'm not just going to stop naming off songs every single album that I like. So, number 9, Kill. This was their 2006 release. Really good album. This one had more than 12 tracks as well. It had like 13 tracks. So yeah, there was only like 2 albums that they did more than 12 tracks. Not saying it's a bad thing, but yeah, this one has like some real popular ones like Make Them Suffer. It's a really good song. Death Walking Terror. I think those two were music videos. And yeah, just the flow of this album was really good. This was the first album with a new producer at the time, Eric Rutan, who's the guitarist and vocalist of Hate Internal, which is a band I really need to look into more, because I've heard Hate Internal, I like them, but I haven't heard them a whole lot. I've heard like 5 songs, and that's it. So yeah, that's really need to get into listening to them more. But yeah, this wasn't like his first time producing, but it was first time producing Cannibal Corpse, pretty much the most infamous band in the genre. So yeah, he did really good. He did some guest vocals in the opening track, "The Time to Kill Us Now," which is a really good opening track. I really like it when Cannibal Corpse opens up with a like 2-minute or 1.5-minute song that's super fast and brutal. Like, that is the Cannibal Corpse way of opening a album. I don't care what anybody says. They don't need to start it with one of the slower, groovy songs, the catchy songs. They need to start it fast and brutal. That's how to start an album. And I think they pretty much started every single album like that. Well, except for like one I can think of. But yeah, number 8. And I'm going to say number 8, and then I'm going to go straight to number 7. Because this was where I had the most trouble with, was trying to decide which album I liked more between number 8 and 7. So I'm going to kind of talk about them at the same time. But number 8 is a Skeletal Domain, the 2014 release, and number 7 is the 2012 release, Torture. I've finished writing everything else. I got number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 9 and 10. And I just had Skeletal Domain and Torture left, and I was like going back and forth on the album like an hour before I started recording this, and just listening to the opening track of this song, opening track of this album, then this album, comparing it, because I just couldn't, for a while I just couldn't decide which one I liked more, because they're both really good. But I did decide that I liked Torture more, because it was actually the first Cannibal Corpse album I listened to, and it got me into the band, and the first album that I own. And I think it's just a much better album. Obviously. But yeah, A Skeletal Domain is really good. It was one of my last album reviews that I did on my YouTube channel. Because for those who don't follow me on YouTube, I'm basically replacing album reviews with this podcast. But yeah, Skeletal Domain was one of the last ones I did. I did a couple, like 2 or 3 more after that. But that was pretty much it. But yeah, I like Skeletal Domain. The artwork's really good. I mean, a lot of Cannibal Corpse's artwork is very graphic and stuff, but like there's almost like not a single drop of blood on a Skeletal Domain's art cover. And I like that, because it's really dark. It's got a nice atmosphere to it, and that atmosphere of the artwork really adds to certain songs on the album, especially the title track, which honestly is probably my favorite song on the album, the title track, Skeletal Domain. It's a really good album. Definitely recommend it, especially for those who like Torture, which is also a really good album, but I think it was a better album. Hence why it's number 7 and not number 8. As I said before, it was my first Cannibal Corpse album that I owned. And I remember listening to the opening track, Demented Aggression. Got me hooked. Got me hooked really good. Of course, that's how they need to start all their albums. The Skeletal Domain kind of started off a little slow because it kind of had a little intro too. But yeah, a Skeletal Domain, it did start with like the fastest track, but it didn't, like the intro took like 30 so seconds, you know. Had that little guitar, kind of like how they start off live. It's like that guitar screeching in the amp or whatnot. Kind of like the amp effects of it. Yeah, and then it starts off. But Torture starts off immediately into the music. And that's how you start the album. That is one factor why I like Torture more than A Skeletal Domain, among others. I just think it's a better album. I like a lot of the groovier songs more than the groovier songs on Skeletal Domain. Scourge of Iron is still in like my top 10, possibly top 5 favorite songs by Cannibal Corpse, honestly. Even though it's kind of low on this list, the album that it's on is low on the list, not the song. But yeah, so Scourge of Iron is definitely my favorite on the album. But it's just a really good album. 2 really good albums. Number 8, Skeletal Domain. Number 7, Torture. Definitely recommend. Number 6 is Vile. This was the first album that George Corpse Grinder Fisher did. And this is another album that starts off right where it needs to start off. Starts off fast, and the first thing you hear, like, think of this back when this album came out. The first thing you heard of George Fisher was that scream on Devoured by Vermin. So yeah, that's one way to do first impressions. It's a really good scream, and he talks about that scream in the documentary that they did, Decades of Torment, which is a really cool documentary. If you like Cannibal Corpse, go check it out. But yeah, this is a really good album. Yeah, don't really have much to say about it. I honestly think that the first song there, Devoured by Vermin, is my favorite. But then I really like Monolith as well. Something about that song I just really like. But yeah, this is, like, it is a very popular album, but it's kind of like in the middle. Not just on this list, but just kind of like in the middle of Cannibal Corpse albums. It's kind of like the start of that era that no one really talks about. I feel like this is just my point of view on it, or what I hear. Like, you got all the earlier stuff, and then you got the new stuff that everyone's talking about, obviously, because it's new and stuff, and everybody talks about the new stuff when it comes out. And of course, I started Cannibal Corpse in 2012 or 2013 when Torture came out. So there's like that era, like right after Vile, kind of Gallery Suicide, Go Obsessed, Retro Spawn, that's not really talked about too much, which kind of makes sense because it's not too great. But Vile's great. Vile is a great album, and I definitely recommend it. Vile, number 6. Number 5 is Eaten Back to Life, their debut album, 1990. It's It's a very interesting album, especially when you start thinking of the title of it. Eaten Back to Life. I dare anyone to... Here's a little challenge. Here's a fun little challenge. Go in the comment section and try to logically explain that title. That'll be fun. Be fun seeing how people can do that. Try to logically explain that. I mean, you really can't, but it's pretty cool. Pretty good album. It's got that... It was 1990, so it still kind of had that 80s production style. But it was a really catchy, groovy album. Like some of the songs, like Born in a Casket, very good song. Scattered Remains, Splattered Brains. That's a really cool, like almost tongue twister like title. But yeah, that's probably my favorite song on the album. Scattered Remains, Splattered Brains. And a little fun fact with that song, this was in their Global Evisceration DVD, which was like 2010-ish, 2009. But they didn't play that song for so long, since like the 90s, early 90s, and they brought it back on the Evisceration tour, Evisceration Plague tour. So and some of the members had to relearn it, because there's only 2 members at the time that wrote the song or was there when the song was written and stuff. So like both guitarists had to relearn it and stuff. The vocalists had to learn all the words. So yeah, that's an interesting fun fact. But yeah, solid album. Really, really like it. Number 5, Eaten Back to Life. Number 4 is Butchered at Birth. The album right after it, 91. This is a pretty intense album. Artwork was great. Album itself was great. My only real complaint is that it doesn't start off like how I want a Cannibal Corpse album to start off. Because like the first track is like 5 minutes and they take like a minute with the intro. But that's not a bad thing, because it doesn't kill the album in any way. It doesn't kill the song in any way. But yeah, it's a really good song. Really good album. Really, really good album. I like the tone, the guitar tone of their first 3 albums. They really did change the guitar tone with the Bleeding. But that classic sounding, like that almost 80s production style, early 90s production style, I really like. So yeah, Butchered at Birth, really good album. Definitely recommend it. Number 3, The Bleeding. I just mentioned this album. Yeah, this was kind of like another battle between 3 and 4, because I didn't really know which one I liked more between Butchered at Birth and The Bleeding. I think in my old top 10 list that I did, I think Butchered at Birth was higher than The Bleeding, because I think The Bleeding was like originally number 5 or something. But that's changed, because even though I do like the early 90s production of the first 3 albums and stuff, the production on The Bleeding is really, really good. Like, it's just very clear, solid production. And, like, the songwriting, the band took... the band took a really catchy, groovy sound to this album. Like, they were changing things up, which was good. I mean, they won't, like, Cannibal Corpse could always write, like, groovy songs that would get stuck in your head. But, like, The Bleeding, really don't know what I'm trying to say. This is another reason why I'm going to have special guests. I just keep repeating myself and saying the same thing over and over, so I'm just going to move on. The Bleeding, number 3, really good album. Number 2, Tomb of the Mutilated. This was originally number 1 in my old list. And if you have watched that video, you probably already know what number 1 is for this list. But Tomb of the Mutilated is widely considered their best album, which is completely understandable. It's a fantastic album. It's got their most famous song, Hammer Smash Face. And that was the song that was in the movie Ace Ventura Pet Detective, which is really cool because you could hear about some people being introduced to Cannibal Corpse through that band, which is pretty cool. It's not every day that a death metal band gains fans from a Jim Carrey movie. So yeah. If you want to know more about that, you go watch the documentary on Cannibal Corpse, which I do recommend because it's really good. It's really good, well done documentary. Yeah, Tomb of the Mutilated, Hammer Smash Face, like the most popular song, arguably their greatest song, really good. And probably the lowest Chris Barnes has ever gone vocally. His vocal performance on this album is insane. He's never gone, even with The Bleeding and then onwards with 6 Feet Under, his other band. Because after The Bleeding, he left and started 6 Feet Under, which is a band I will touch on in this podcast somewhere down the line, but he's never been able to go this deep before. Ever. This is the peak of his vocal performance on Tomb of the Mutilated. Great album. Definitely recommend it. It's an intense album too. So number 1, Bloodthirst. Yeah, originally on my old list it was number 1 was Tomb of the Mutilated, number 2 was Bloodthirst. But that's changed because I think after listening to the albums and really comparing them with one another, not only is the production phenomenal and flawless with Bloodthirst, I mean, it's one of those productions, it's one of those albums that have production that's so good that you just can't get over it. You can't get over the fact of how good that production is. But the album itself is just really, really good. And the album was kind of between a couple albums that weren't so great, like Galactic Suicide and Gore Obsessed, which I like both of those albums, but they're not on the same level as a lot of other Cannibal Corpse albums. But to have 2 mediocre albums in between a flawless album was kind of shocking to me. But yeah, this album is flawless. It really is. I have 3 different copies of the album Bloodthirst. I have it on CD, and then I have 2 different copies on vinyl. Which, yeah, this album is just great. I really don't know what else to say. Flawless is the perfect word you can use to describe it. It's starts off with the song Pounded Into Dust, and it doesn't, like, this album pounds you into dust. Number 1, Bloodthirst is my favorite Cannibal Corpse album. And hopefully somewhere down the road I'll definitely go more into depth about Cannibal Corpse. And I'll try to edit some of it out, but there's going to be pauses in between, and that's why I want to have special guests, because it flows much better. Like, it's just much better experience for me. There's no way this is one reason why I didn't want to do album reviews anymore, was because it was just me talking. So, in podcasts, I could have other people. I mean, yeah, I could do an album review with someone else, but, I mean, on a podcast, we're basically, essentially doing that anyway, so. So, yeah, that is the first episode of Metal Gladiator. The Metal Gladiator podcast. I am the Metal Gladiator, Ian Sylvain. And if you want exclusive content on the Metal Gladiator, I will be doing it live on Instagram at Ian Sylvain 1776. And that's pretty much it. So, thank you for listening.